what a lifetime means. What an ending means. They need me.
It's End of Dragons Daily 24, the show in which we discuss random stuff to do with the upcoming X-Pack End of Dragons for Guild Wars, what that could mean for the game, what it could mean for the story, the community, any of that good stuff. This is a back and forth Q&A show, so you guys can drop your comments down below and you've got a chance to get into the next episode. And today, I'm looking for a fight. Today, I want to respond to, and now I've been kind of avoiding some of these comments, but I want to respond to some of the more harshly toned messages from you guys, because I like checking people who are being arrogant and condescending. Oh boy. So we're just going to do a miscellaneous approach of different topics currently on the table. We'll get back to the idea of specific subjects per episode sometime soon. Right, so first we've got Aulius Vara, who says, about hints on Balthazar. In every episode, between his introduction and his reveal, you have a mission about disguising yourself. One is explicitly as a Massart. Two, he literally says he's the humans' god. His magic is all about fire. His goals are not Lazarus's at all. He wants to fight the dragons rather than run away from them. Bram falls out with Dragon's Watch the same way that Balthazar falls out with the gods. Frankly, if you think there were no hints, you weren't paying attention. Alright, so I hope this last sentence is not directed at me, because if you listened carefully yesterday, I did not say there were no hints. I said that the hints were too buried and a little bit too obscure. The general point I was trying to make yesterday is that the devs didn't drop the hints well enough for it to really feel like a part of the arc that we could relish in. This comment, you weren't paying attention, I can tell you for a fact is nonsense. A lot of people were paying very close attention for the entire span of the arc. So this is really the first 4 episodes. That's Lazarus's introduction at the start, right up till the reveal that he's probably an imposter at the end of episode 4, and then finally, oh, the imposter is Balthazar. They're kind of 2 separate stories, really. At the very beginning of episode 5. For that duration of time, there was barely any real speculation about it. Even in that critical moment at the end of episode 4, where they float the idea he's fake, to the start of episode 5, where in the very first instance it's revealed as Balthazar, the community was not clued in on the idea this was going to be a human god that popped out. Now, I can't attest to having seen every single thread ever, but I do know what the general community murmurings were, and they were not clued in. And when people did stumble onto stuff, like earlier in the season particularly, like maybe the White Mantle wielding a Balthazar shield, it was just assumed to be like an error on the devs' part. Nobody pushed it further, because why would we? First of all, even the idea that Lazarus wasn't Lazarus, there were no murmurings on until ahead of the snake, when ArenaNet themselves had to prompt it with the reveal that one of the phylacteries, one of the pieces of his soul, wasn't even there for the ritual. And even when they did that, they allowed it to be a question as to whether it was the information we found in Cordicus's manor that was wrong. You know, you give this stuff here that in retrospect you might call a hint that his goals aren't even Lazarus's goals, but that's completely blind to the fact that in-game, our characters question him about his motives, and he blatantly lies to the camera and says, oh, I, meaning I as a Massart, was selfish back then, and I've changed my ways. You know, the game did address and basically clip these threads for anyone who was paying attention at the time. This comment here from Mario actually reflects something I said yesterday, but ended up cutting out. I can't remember why. It was in association with another topic, weirdly. They say, you talking weirdly connected 2 things for me. Maybe they noticed how fast the community caught onto Morgemoth and thus decided to make less hints about Balthazar to make it a bit harder, but overdid it. Just a weird thought. Also, I agree, don't do time travel. But yeah, that idea that people found the Morgemoth thing, I think was huge, and I think they were a little bit careful. They were cautious. They knew people were very deeply scrutinizing this stuff. I, especially during that era of this game development, was really closely looking. This is while the original Mystery series was in full-blown production. It was after we'd done big story analysis on Heart of Thorns, the 3 raid arcs. Can you remember the amount of scrutiny and community discussion that was going on about the actual story of the Spirit Veil? So yeah, when it came to season 3, and they had this idea of doing Lazarus but not Lazarus, I think they were overly cagey about it. And to be clear, yesterday's discussion we were talking about like how drafty they were being. I do think there are enough hints and signs to pretty much definitively say that at the start of season 3 and Lazarus's introduction, they knew it was Balthazar. I do think it's fair to say that. Again, there are hints. I never denied that yesterday. And in retrospect, if you're paying attention, which to be fair to this commenter might be what they mean, they're visible. In fact, for today, I decided to play a little bit of Season 3. Had a bit of a phenomenon again, just like I did with Season 4 yesterday, where it's a lot better than I remember, just being able to run through it all. You guys remember we were talking about the idea of monthlies? I think a really good idea for a monthly would be complete a whole season. You know, maybe this month we have to complete Season 3, all the instances. Maybe next month we have to do Season 4, maybe the Icebridge Saga. There's becoming enough now that they can do that and shuffle it around. And you know what they could do if that was in the game? Leading into the next expansion, have people basically play through the whole franchise on the way up. And, you know, maybe get bonus rewards for being a party. That would be so amazing. Back to the hints, though. You can see pretty plainly on screen, he is, as you say, very often using fiery stuff. I do think that's a pretty blatant hint. He talks about people burning, and it's consistent across each instance wherever you find him. So it works when you look back now, but I do want to fervently defend the people of the day, because this fire stuff wasn't enough. Like, the fire's quite often purpley looking, which you might think is like a weird kind of Massart fire. And every enemy in the game has to be fighting somehow. The dialogue never specifically calls attention to it. And fire is fiery looking attacks is probably one of the highest on the list types of animations the devs use as like just generic damage or to show that something's powerful. You know, you see like the Ghost Jotun at the end of Path 1 Arar Explorable using a ton of fire magic. Are we to assume that that's Balthazar because of the fire? No, you need to combine that with other hints. You need to draw a little bit more attention to it. Even just the idea that Balthazar's using powerful magic, or Lazarus is, he's a Massart. The Massart are renowned for having access to powerful spellcasting abilities. There is, and again, this is easier to see in retrospect, the little caveat that most Massart we see in Guild Wars 1 that are elementalists are air elementalists, not fire ones. So maybe someone somewhere dug all the way into that. But the question now is, to what end? Because as I mentioned, they hadn't even properly floated the idea that this guy wasn't who it seemed until right before the Balthazar reveal itself at the end of Ahead of the Snake. I think episode 1 would have really benefited from Lazarus being ignorant, or rather Balthazar being ignorant about some widely known Massart thing. Or even just like a contemporary Tyria thing. That might be even better. Just to sow one little seed of doubt that something extra suspicious is going on with this guy. He's not suspicious just because he's a Massart and we know he's going to be shady and he's a bad guy. He's suspicious for some other reason. And no, I don't think having Marjorie exposition dump and say, ooh, the hair on the back of my neck is up, there's something about him, I'm going to go follow him, is enough. So I like this idea that the gods haven't been paying attention the past 250 years, so Balthazar doesn't know something like obvious or that you think Lazarus should know. But it's hard because both Lazarus and the gods have been gone for about the same period of time. And if Balthazar's plan was to use the White Mantle as early spears against the dragon, as he says, then he has to be knowledgeable of current events. You know, looking back nowadays, I feel like one of the things that did the most damage was probably Wing 3. In which we see Zira trying to bring Lazarus back alive. We take it seriously as though everything's going to be working. And when you get to the stasis chamber after having beaten the raid wing, well, what do you find? That is empty. And they leave a bit of a mystery there. The character, actually, I'll pull this from the wiki. The character says, did Lazarus escape? Was he killed in the process? What happened here? And then what happens in the very next release? Lazarus appears. Well, how did he get there? It seems obvious the whole stasis chamber and pretense for the entirety of the third wing mattered. You have to remember, one of the kind of plot-holy things, even to this day, is that we don't really know when and where Balthazar reappeared on Tyria before then wandering over to the Bloodstone. We see Ritlock come back at the start of Heart of Thorns. It's interesting to think there's a side story there of Balthazar coming back during that same arc, presumably after the death of Morgemoth, or you would have thought he would have been around there to absorb that magic, and the devs were just super cagey about it. So we have an empty stasis chamber, a story about a Massart being woken up, and then the Massart appears. The Massart doesn't act suspiciously anywhere. The thought there was something deeper going on was buried. So going all the way back to the original commenter, who suggests that anyone who missed the hints in retrospect after the arc was done wasn't paying attention, I think is being really, really cruel to the average Guild Wars 2 player. There were a lot of people enthusiastic about the story who saw Balthazar appear, and their first thought wasn't, oh, that's because Bram mirrors the story of falling out with the other gods. And they didn't think, oh, that's why we've been disguising ourselves all season. It's because there's been this elaborate hint. And look at how on the nose and amazing that comment it was on the Fire Island chain in episode 2. It's been asking too much of the player base. I think ArenaNet dropped the ball on this one a little, and I stand by that. And it's okay, and it's understandable, because they're delivering story through living world, which is very hard, and they were very ambitious through season 3. I think that's cool enough. Alright, let's pick another fight here with Tiny Bird. Wow, dungeons aren't that fun, guys? Seriously? They're still fun, and such a refreshing escape from content that's too challenging, gritty, or require giant groups. It's true, with power creep, it's easier. But it's been so long playing certain paths with just 2-man parties to bring the challenge back up. It's also really fun taking newer people through them and showing the mysterious, unfinished branches in there. I like them as is, but I do think they should take a small look at them to make some paths able to be done solo or with less than 5 people. Right, so I think on this one there's a bit of a miscommunication. The fact that in your message you say, it's been so fun, blah 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 blah, gives me the sense that you are someone who played a lot of dungeons, stopped playing a lot of dungeons, and now have just come back to them, and you're having fun like as a recent contemporary thing. This is a flash in the pan for you. It's been so fun going back to dungeons, and to that, I think that's perfectly fair. I understand that wholeheartedly. I've had several phases and moments where I do that too, because yeah, I do believe that if you don't overdo it, if you're not considering them as a full-on, cornerstone of the end game that you should be continually doing, they are fun. They're just as fun as a lot of other content that you're not going to be interfacing with for too long. And yeah, the idea that you can take new players into them, yeah, they're great. I am a staunch believer that a lot of the 2012 stuff is still brilliant. Like, I remember when Heart of Thorns gave vanilla Guild Wars 2 for free, people saying, oh, that's because it's old now and it's not very good. I don't really believe in that. I think that the 2012 stuff is still extremely entertaining. It's just, have you played it yet or not? And the dungeons count for that too. After a long enough time, maybe you can go back. And yeah, it's always been true as well that even with power creep, you can make dungeons harder again by low manning, or by doing them only in green gear, or by doing them by taking all your traits off and so on. That's true for a lot of the Guild Wars 2 content. A lot of meta events become insanely fun if you deliberately ruin your own gear and you play them without a Zerg. Now you're experiencing a ton of mechanics that usually get blown over by Zergs. But the fact is, for the everyman, for the average engaged player, they're not doing that. Because players don't take their own fun into their own hands. They look at what the devs reward them for doing, and they do that. And since dungeons don't reward you for playing with less than 5, and playing with weaker gear, and playing under more enjoyable moment-to-moment gameplay, it is not a part of the game we can appreciably say is affecting anything. So yeah, I'm an advocate for change to dungeons to bring them into the fold a little bit more. I would like them to be a cornerstone part of the end game. I'd like it to be that one day I log in and I decide to do fractal dailies, another day I log in and maybe I decide to do some dungeon dailies, another day that I log in, maybe now I'm being pushed over to do raiding stuff or strike mission stuff. There are all these formats in the game that should be renewably there in people's minds, and dungeons are not adequate at the moment. That's because, yeah, if you do play them in the most optimal way, which players will seek to, they're boring, they're rubbish, they aren't good anymore, they haven't held up to the power creep. To a certain extent, if you're a casual player, I think you can get a lot of joy out of absolutely destroying bosses you remember struggling with in 2012, but that's kind of like a one and done thing. You have the thrill of being ludicrously overpowered, and then you realize, oh, this is about as entertaining as walking around killing Scale in Queensdale. That's a shame. And then you kind of move on. Dungeons, as a long-term investment, need a lot of work to become fun. And I hate to admit this, but for a lot of MMO players, fun equals rewarding. So the devs have got to do something there. That's why it kind of came up in the daily thing. I stand by it. Dungeons need work. And that's not even talking about like the bugs and the skips and the breaks. Quick sidebar, I'm not picking a fight here. Zyfent says all these years later that Taimi line does still stick in my brain and make me roll my eyes. You know, it's funny, like I say, I was playing Season 3 today. I think I was a bit hard on that line. I don't know, guys. Looking back, I think maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it was just a joke. There's something about her delivery. I mean, they gloss over it. It was a bad idea for a line, all right? I still stand by that. But maybe she is just kind of joking. Like, I can definitely imagine that the character of Taimi knows that no one knows the name of the dragon, and the character of Taimi knows that we, the commander, know that no one knows the name of the dragon, except that there's an S. So she's just having a bit of fun with it, and there's like that unspoken acknowledgement that we're all in the complete picture. There, I've sort of dissected the joke there and killed the frog, but there is that possibility, and if it absolves the quality of the story, maybe we should grab it with both hands. For this one, let's look at two of you guys fighting. So Dante says, sorry for the spam, I'll get invested in the video. For what it's worth, I really liked all your comments here. About the voice actor thing, I don't think the Critical Role people will leave Guild Wars 2 scene for multiple reasons. First, they're setting up the side D&D job as something that they could make work with their jobs. Second, the Guild Wars 2 franchise, as other MMOs, as a long-running thing, gets you constant income as an established voice actor, and voice actors have to take up multiple gigs to make a salary. Third, I see it as unlikely that these people will ever think about leaving the game, since the D&D thing, as enjoyable as it is and famous as it, could go away in an instant. William George says, let's put aside for a second the cost of maintaining the current VA cast, ... Doesn't it seem likely that they've been setting up writing out a lot of the Dragon's Watch to you? Ritlock's become obsessed with getting back with Krisha since Requiem, and all of his arc in Icebreed Saga has been about that. Graham is looking like he's going to become an avatar of the spirits, or so it seems. Taimi's been a total ass since she returned. Kaz and Jory's relationship is collapsing again. Also, the whole Destroyers can't burn Jormag's frozen, and the Asura talking about upping Jormag's power both seem like a Chekhov's gun to me. I'm betting the commander is going to Cantha alone. I do think costs are a part of the reason for that, but I'd like to be wrong. I'm ride or die for Ritlock. To which the response was, the idea of them replacing all the voice actors for the main characters on the next expansion is complete madness. It doesn't just make sense on a production point of view. You can imagine that they have contracts on those big scale projects to bind them to the projects for a certain time. Also, the voice actors world is not that big, so they're going to always go back for those few good ones. I really don't get why the Guild Wars 2 community is always so dramatic about every topic. Like Colin's leaving, oh no, Guild Wars 2's failing. No, it's still here. Guild Wars 2 story is going in a certain direction, and the main voice actors have other side jobs. It means they'll leave for the next expansion. No, it just means they have a side job. Jeez. So yeah, maybe the idea that they're all going to be gone is a little bit over the top, but I think there is some space for a middle ground here. I do see some voice talent getting phased out. I do think it's very likely that the next expansion will have a limited cast. We've seen that with the other X-Packs too. I mean, hell, Path of Fire itself really did open with the commander going alone. It's just that then some of the other characters ended up filtering in, and we did only really have a handful. They also got a bunch of new people on that time. I mentioned on a recent video I really like the way that Elder Scrolls Online is handling things, where each expansion feels like kind of a separate story. You don't have to have played all the way through everything to get to grips with it. And I kind of think that a part of Guild Wars 2 doing that, which I think it would be in its benefit to do after End of Dragons, you know, an expansion 4, and then 5 after that, 6 after that, if we're going this way. I think it would be a really good idea, and in that case, yeah, that means less repeat characters. Of course, you could have the same voice artists doing those characters, but if they're getting expensive, then sure, why not do someone a little bit cheaper? Over to the Dragon's Watch story stuff as well. I'm not really sure I buy that this is signs that they're getting rid of these characters. Like, if Marjorie and Casimir were being phased out, surely you would have their relationship going well so that they can have a happily ever after. Everyone knows that there's no drama following people once they're married or once they have the baby or after the cheating has happened or whatever. People don't like to watch the happy ending. So if you're going to write someone out, give them a happy ending. And yet it seems like they're actually creating more drama. In fact, with most of these examples, it looks like there's more drama, more things to talk about and go forwards. So I'm not sure I follow that line of reasoning too much. But yeah, I expect some actors to get phased out. I think it's inevitable. And for what it's worth either, I don't think that anyone's being dramatic about this topic at all. This next comment's like a really wild ride to me. Kevin says, you lost me on this one. I enjoy your content, but I couldn't keep listening when you said the devs have very little drafting. The Guild Wars 2 story has been in the making since Guild Wars 1. The continuation of Kaith's story follows from the tree and the Zephyrites in the Guild Wars Nightfall expansion. Just a mention, but you can visit the Pale Tree and the Centaur at the location in Guild Wars that now corresponds to the Grove. So absolutely the Mordremoth story was already known and probably quite fleshed out. Chasing Jormag could not have happened until Bram grew up a little bit. I'll return to this video later. For now, I'm calling it. Conjecture is all good, but please check the history before you say that the story is not well thought out. Oh man, this is like a classic example of when someone knows a little bit about a topic and now they feel like they know everything. Listen to me, Guild Wars has been very good, particularly in the transition between Guild Wars 1 and Guild Wars 2. There have been definitely times where they've drafted well ahead, and I think after Nightfall and the announcement of Eye of the North and all that is definitely one of those times, and it's created a very cohesive through line. You're right, they definitely did, around the launch in 2012, have the idea of a jungle dragon. That's how they put the hints in that the community analysed. I mean, obviously. I never said otherwise. What I attested to was the timing of the Morgemoth story. I'm sure they had an idea, but that it was going to be so soon, the first expansion, or even that Living World Season 1 was about Morgemoth, at its very inception, that is what I questioned. Yeah, they've had phases of doing things well, but the fact that the studio in 2007 figured a lot out about what they wanted to do for a 2012 release doesn't mean that the studio in 2012, with the property suddenly on his hands and probable ambitions to make other games, had a clear-cut idea of where they were going afterwards. Just because they've been good sometimes doesn't mean they can have been weak at other times. Yeah, you can go to the Grove in Guild Wars 1 and Ventari's there. They knew about the idea of the Grove. It was especially important that they knew about that particular subject because they were penning it as one of the new playable races for the sequel game, a major selling point because the original game didn't have multiple races. So obviously a lot of that stuff was plotted out. You can't then use that to extrapolate on every plot beat ever. That doesn't mean they knew in any detail necessarily where they wanted to go when Zaitan died. You're trying to argue that the reason we didn't immediately go to the Jormag story is because, what, they had already conceived of Bram from years ago, but for some inexplicable reason hadn't talked about him in any of the personal story. Look, Bram is a great topic for just how left field they can be. If Bram had been there from the outset, he absolutely would have been mentioned in the novel Edge of Destiny, or even earlier than that. He's Air's son, for Christ's sake. And when that was revealed to us, it was just weird. If they always knew about that side of her character, why not give us a little hint about it before the ultimate reveal? They didn't, because he was manifested late in the day. Because it was something conceived in the minds of the Season 1 team that eventually they decided to roll into the prophecy and the chipping of the tooth, and we are where we are today. A lot of this stuff, yes, was planned in advance, but a lot more of it, particularly right after release, was kind of just off the cuff. And I really do stand by that. I think there was specifically that phase right from the death of Zaitan up until the end of Heart of Thorns. I think they were pretty waffly about what they were doing and where they were going. I think they really rallied after that, though. And like I say, I think Balthazar and the idea of Path of Fire, and particularly the egg, for what it's worth, the phases of Aureen's development, I think all of that was well plotted. But no, you're giving the studio way too much credit. You were mind blown by some of their foresight, and now you think that absolutely every facet of this vast, complicated IP and universe has been meticulously planned out. Sorry to tell you, buddy, but it hasn't been. You're telling me here to stop the conjecture and check the history? And look, you know, you do need to double check things as you go forward, but you are talking to someone who's been here through all of that history, every step of the way. Well, except factions and prophecies. I do want to make up another point that the reality is life will throw the studio curveballs when we're talking about like a 15-year period like this. Sometimes there'll be less access to voice talent, so you get weird stuff with Zodja, or you get the invention of a whole new replacement cast for Destiny's Edge. Sometimes funding is cut and changed, so ideas for expansions don't manifest. Sometimes talent that's otherwise decent and enthusiastic about the lore gets embroiled in massive controversies and ends up leaving. People get promoted, people move away. You have to be fluid. Even if they had planned everything out way back when, it would never have been implemented exactly as they'd visualized. Ever. A little comment here that will actually affect a mini video I shot yesterday. and you guys should be seeing on the channel sometime soon. The Creepy Mini is just a reference to the Full Metal Alchemist anime, where they create living abominations using Philosopher's Stones and alchemy, often to gruesome results. And Tech Striker said, unfortunate when interesting things just turn out to be references. Guild Wars 1 was full of them. Yeah, a lot of people have told me this. I do know. I've always known that it's a reference to Full Metal Alchemist. I haven't actually seen the show, so I don't know, like, how right on the head it is. Like, does this look exactly the same as a thing that's in there? Because for me, I kind of think, even if it is a reference, that doesn't mean you can't do cool stuff with it. Like, there was a dwarf character in Guild Wars 1 that was a reference to a World of Warcraft meme video, or I suppose back then we called them viral videos. And yet that dwarf character still had a ton of really awesome story written about them. So yeah, I still see this as a strike, even if it's quite blatantly referential. As long as it's like not really stepping on someone else's IP or leaving them open to legal issues, I think this could be really good. Guys, it's a fully animated creature with like sound effects for idle animations, and God, I want to fight it. Also, a lot of you guys are very in favor of both the mini idea and the strike mission idea, so I think you will probably see those videos. Maybe even the tonic one. I kind of wrote scripts for all of them. We'll see how enthusiastic I am going forwards. And so that's it. Thanks very much for watching. Please do remember Patreon. The next episode is live already on there if you guys are watching this. We'll try to grow the series, blah, blah, blah. I'm really running out of time. Don't want to push 25 minutes. Thanks, everybody. See you next time.